gets harder and harder to get up in the morning.
Me neither. I know, I'm making sure we're not doing that. Almost stepped on tail, but I think we're good for now.
All right. Goes by our team. Coming up in the next hour, take a look at some of the fantastic cars they have here.
Might be someplace to look later.
July 4th, August 8th.
Does it say what year?
No,
It probably might stay over there though.
I can't read that. William Leopold Camilletti. I was born in 1941 in Wellsburg, West Virginia. My sister was Mary Ann, and my brother was John. My dad worked for Pillsbury. He was a plant superintendent of making paper. My grandfather lived with us for many years, so my mother took care of the house and my grandfather and us three kids. There was a lot of Sicilian, Giulianova, and some others. I can't remember all of them. But it was probably nice because most of our neighbors were all Italian. Everybody was really close. You did something wrong, you got to home before you did. My mother and my dad came over when they were probably, I think, around 6 or 7 years old. And they met here in the United States. My mother lived on what they called High Street, and my dad lived on Main Street. And my dad used to go up to visit my mother before they were married, and my mother's dad was still alive. And when they would sit in the living room, and my grandfather, that's my mother's dad, decided it was time for him to leave, he would start coughing. If you didn't move, then he would start walking up and down the hall. The third time is he grabbed my dad's hat, put it on his head, and escorted him to the door. So that's how he did.
My full name is Linda Ray Anderson Camilletti. My grandkids call me Grammy and Grandma. I was born in Rockford. And on January 9th, 1947. And when I was 6 weeks old, my parents moved out to the state of Washington. I know my father, when he moved out to Washington, until he died, he was totally involved in police work. And he ended up, when I was in high school, being chief of police of the little town that I grew up in. I did a few things that I shouldn't have done when I was in high school. Embarrassed my mom and dad a few times, but my dad was a cool guy. He was very tall and always happy, always happy. And if he could do anything that involved police work, he was totally happy. That was what he really loved doing. He was very, very, very smart. And being that he was an immigrant from Sweden, he was very, very intelligent and had the most amazing handwriting for a man, and especially for somebody that came over when they were 8 years old and had to, learn a new language and start all over. He worked in the coal mines and the copper mines and that as a child. my grandmother, my dad's mother and father, they lived on a farm. One day I was up there and it was just Grandma and me. And she got some old rags, and she had an old pedal sewing machine. And she pulled it out into the kitchen, and she basically said, here's some material, there's a sewing machine, have at it, you know. And I was able to play with the sewing machine. My mother was a secretary to a lawyer, and she worked for him. I don't even remember his name or anything, but I know she worked in his office for quite a long time. So yeah, I really raised my sister at times. You know, they both worked. I had a list on the table when I came home from school of things I had to do. I ended up being a very good cook at a young age because my parents, because of them working, you know, there was a lot for me to do and take care of.
I graduated high school in 1960. My plans after that were, because I didn't have any plans after that because I was drafted into the Army. So that put a kibosh on my ambitions of working, but I went in the Army for 2 years. Back then you had what they call the draft, and when you turned a certain age you had to sign up for the draft. And then it was like a volunteer, or not a volunteer, like a lottery about when you were called. So when I got called, Jim got called, and about 3 or 4 of us guys got called at the same time. The letter came in the mail and says you have been, I still have it upstairs, something like you've been selected to go into this military, report at a certain date, at a certain time. That's the first time I ever left. It was a little hard at first, but then I was pretty lucky because it was about 3 or 4 of us guys that came from the same town. And we got to talk to each other and stuff like that. One nice thing is we were all in the same boat. Everybody in the platoon were in the same boat. They were just away from home, away from their family and stuff like that. So
I have good memories of high school, especially my senior year when I met Bill. He was a blind date.
A friend of mine was dating a girl from Sumner, Washington. And we went out a few times, and first time we went out, I had to go out and I had to borrow some money for her because at the end of the month, I didn't have any money. So then I had to go out and ask her out again so I could pay her back.
Because he was over 21, they went and they bought I don't remember what it was, but they went and bought a bottle. And they bought a bottle, and we went out and we parked, and we drank. And Bill and I are sitting in the back seat of the car. And I'm sitting next to him on his side over here. And all of a sudden, everything started churning. And so I said, Bill, roll down your window. I need some air. And all of a sudden, I lean over him. Instead of leaning out my own window in the back of the car, I lean over him and I puke all over the side of the car. And I thought, oh man, this guy's not going to ever want to see me again. And that's one of the things I was talking about earlier, about, you know, how everything gets back to your folks. Well, this didn't get back to my folks, but Bill did know my dad because my dad used to go out to the rifle range out at Fort Lewis, and they would do shooting, you know, practice out there. So he kind of knew who he was.
First time when I met him there at the house, I was sitting on the couch with Linda. about half asleep, had my arm around her, and here comes Andy, that's Linda's dad, in the door, and he had his uniform on. And the only thing I did when I woke up, and all I could see was he was pulling his gun out of his holster. The only thing I could think of was which window I was going to go out. Then I realized I was on the second floor. And then my brain started to kick in and said, you had nothing to worry about. And what he was doing is he was taking his gun out of his holster, and he had a place up on the top shelf in the closet where he kept it. And he always put it up high so that no one could get a hold of it.
In January of '65, he had to go to Alaska for 2 or 3 months. And so I didn't see him for 2 or 3 months, and I would write him letters.
I kept writing the letters to Linda, and I never got any back from her. Until one day, I guess, mail finally caught up with me, and I got a whole bunch of letters, and I just signed out a Jeep and climbed or drove out in the tundra, or whatever you want to call it, and sat there and read them all.
I was able to drive my mom and dad's car, so I went out and I got him out at Fort Lewis, and then he would come down and stay, you know, at where we were, where I lived. And I don't know, it was the second and he would drive the car. I let him drive the car. And I think it was the second or third time we went out, and he says,
Would you like to spend or go to lunch with me every day? And I said, what do you mean? I said, would you like to get married? She said, yes.
I guess it was kind of then that I knew for sure that he's the one I want to be with.
I liked being with her. Just the idea of being able to be together or something like that.
He loved me. I loved him. Still do. It was just immediate family. We got married in St. Andrew's Catholic Church.
Her mom and dad had a restaurant, and they lived upstairs.
And then my mom had like an open house for a reception afterwards at the restaurant. When we moved from Washington to West Virginia, by then Bill had a car. We were going to drive down through California and across the South, and then up to, West Virginia. We got going. We got down to Northern California. First thing happens is I get the flu. So we ended up staying in a motel for 2 days. Then we went down, we got through California. We got into Flagstaff, Arizona. We hit one of their biggest snowstorms there. And the rear end of the car decided to give out. So we had to sell the car. So then we took the bus the rest of the way. So it was 2 days on the bus. And, between Flagstaff and Albuquerque, the bus was full. So poor Bill, he sits on the rail once a few people get off, and he gets a seat. It's the middle of the night, and, your feet are under the seat in front of you, and you're kind of sleeping, and all of a sudden, my feet felt really, really warm. And it's like, how could my feet feel so warm? Well, there was a lady with 2 little kids in front of us. And those little ones had peed through the seat and peed all over my feet. And that's why my feet felt warm.
That was the only thing, you know, when we come back to West Virginia, she's not Italian. She's not Italian, but she blended in real well with my family. The only thing she had a hard time with was my family's a hugging family. And sometimes people don't take to that. But she got real well. She did real well.
My mom and dad weren't real close. You know, it was funny because even though I was around a lot of the Swedes, the aunts and uncles, and, you know, they would hug occasionally, but my closeness and my ability to be close to people and appreciate things came when I got to West Virginia with Bill. His family was Italian family, and they were close, and everybody hugged. And I remember the first day I met all his aunts, a lot of his aunts and uncles, with these great big pots making sauce and, you know, making spaghetti and meatballs and all this stuff. They just kind of dropped everything, and all of a sudden, I was part of the family. I was only 18. I was just going to turn 19 in January. And only being 18, there was a lot of things I didn't know. And I learned a lot of things real quick. And a lot of it was about taking care of a brand new baby. If we didn't live with Bill's mom and dad, and his mom didn't help me, I wouldn't have known what to do with that baby. But she got us through it. Then when Christine came along 13 months later, I knew exactly what to do.
It was exciting. But then when you first see the baby, it's something, I don't know if you can describe it or not. It's just the idea of something that small that's depending on you to do everything for it.
He was an amazing dad. And he always has been one to take and change a dirty diaper, or, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered, you know, whatever we had to go through, he was there. He was an amazing father. Still is.
Linda's grandfather, his wife died, and he needed help taking care of the the sheltered care home. And we decided we'd go there.
West Virginia was temporary. The first 18 years in Washington, but Rockford, I was born here, but Rockford was, has actually been my home, I guess, you know, because the two of us have been here for so long. What, 55, 56 years, something like that.
Linda and I had 3 children of our own, 3 children. Our 3 children all married. I had 1 daughter-in-law, 2 son-in-laws. I have 12 grandkids. And out of the 12 grandkids, half of them are married. And I have 13 great-grandchildren. I shouldn't say I do. We have 13 great-grandchildren.
It's hard when your kids get older and they have their own families and their families have families, you know. And I think one of the hardest things, too, at times is not being selfish when you have to share the other family's holidays and that. I mean, because your child is married and has children doesn't mean you get them every holiday. Their spouse has their family. And sometimes it's hard not being selfish.
You have to learn to shut up. I mean, not actually shut up, just if they ask for advice, yes, give it to them. But the idea of letting them make their own decisions. If they fall, be there to support them, help them. But something they have to do, same thing everybody has to do. Linda and I did the same thing. We fell a few times. My parents helped us. The same way, when my kids fall, I help them as much as we can. And same thing with them. My kids, when their kids fall, they'll be there to help them pick them up.
He has gotten me through so much in those 58 years. And I don't know, there's just nobody like him. He's an angel.
When you start raising kids, you know, the idea of being able to go places with your kids, and Linda would take the kids someplace and I couldn't go, or I'd take them someplace and she couldn't go. And we always worked things out so the kids could go.
He's so sweet, and he's such a good husband and father and grandfather and great-grandfather. I mean, there's nothing that, if it's at all possible, he wouldn't do for anybody in his family.
It was very impressive, the amount of people two people can create. The idea of having 3 children, all of them, you know, some of them were married, and after they got married, they were just grew and grew and grew. It just, the world has changed so much, and you have to put up with so many difficulties. And you have to give and take.
It's give and take on both of us, but he gives more than I do.
You might have to give up a little bit, accept a little bit of failure or something like that, and until things smooth out. But it'll be very hard.
We never go to bed at night without saying, "I love you." Our kids, our grandkids, they never say goodbye that they don't say, "I love you." And we don't ever say goodbye to them that we don't say, but we love them.
Put up with more. Don't be so bossy. Don't be a one-way, look at things one way. There's other ways of looking at things. Look at it from both ways. Making your decisions together instead of one way, one person.
It's not easy. Life is not easy. Love is not easy.
Make sure you kiss her every night and every morning. But then things will straighten out. I can look back now and think the problems we had back 30 years ago, I look at them now, they weren't problems. They were little bumps in the road. Back then they were like mountains. But now they were just little bumps in the road, that's all.
Well, do you guys have anything else to say?
That I love her.
Yes, he does. I know he does, and he knows I love him too.
The little red light's the ones who behave. What?
I can't with you guys.
Turn the little red light off, please.
I'm getting there.
Okay, it's time to turn the little red light off.